assume a $3 billion shift, is schools aren't going to get paid back. So to me, what that means is that's a cut. And I think the governor and the members of the legislature ought to just be honest with that. I mean, the governor's spreadsheet does not show the schools being paid back in the next biennium. And so what I'm going to propose today, I'm introducing a bill today, is codifying that school payment shift in law. That the legislature is going to commit to pay the school shift back. And in more than just language, I'm going to propose extending the sales tax to clothing and using the money to committing $120 million of the money to pay back the school shift. And then with the balance of the money, I'm going to reduce the general sales tax rate by 1/4%. So that's the proposal. It very closely mirrors the recommendations of the governor's own 21st Century Commission, his appointed group that said the state should look at expanding the sales tax to some items. They didn't specifically name anything. So I'm simply proposing that on July 1st, we'll extend the sales tax to clothing, and in the first year, it will raise $257 million. I'm proposing that we use that to, the Finance Committee use that to mitigate the budget, the short-term deficit, and that on July 1st next year, we start paying back the school shift at $120 million a year, and we reduce the general sales tax rate by 1/4%. So that is really the proposal, and look forward to your questions. Pretty simple.
Why put the sales tax on clothing? Why that particular move?
Well, people have been talking about that around here for a long time, the idea of extending the sales tax and cutting the rate. And it's just an issue that's been around for a long time. And it's interesting, the sales tax on clothing actually is much less regressive than the general sales tax by itself. Significantly less regressive. So when you expand the sales tax to clothing and cut the general rate on everything else, you actually make Minnesota's sales tax system less regressive than it is today.
Can you explain why?
Because people with higher incomes buy more clothing and more expensive clothing. And lower income people, the sales tax is generally regressive. And they just don't buy as much clothing, and they buy less of it. It's interesting, if you divide the state into the population deciles, about 250,000 households in each one, the top 10% of households are actually going to pay 31% of the tax. And I think that handout's probably in the packet that you received.
Was this an idea that you had floated with other legislators, and what sort of support or opposition do you expect this to get?
No, I just made actually Senator Poggemiller aware of this yesterday. The bill's getting a number today. I'm the only author. This is just me. This is not a position of the Senate caucus. I haven't talked to members of the Senate Tax Committee about it. Although if you've been following the discussions of the Senate Tax Committee, there is some bipartisan support for looking at an expansion of the sales tax. So I do think in the Senate Tax Committee at least, there's some bipartisan support to consider something like this.
You've opposed this.
I'll just be real clear though, this is just me. I don't want, please don't characterize this as somehow being a proposal from the DFL caucus. I haven't talked to the caucus about it. I haven't even asked anybody to consider if they would author it with me. But somebody needs to have this discussion. You know, previous governors, back to when I was in high school, when the state has had a financial crisis, have considered some revenue. And I think of Governor Anderson certainly did in '71 when the Minnesota Miracle was born, and certainly Governor Quee was well known for an income tax surcharge when in the '81-'82 recession, and Purpose Arnie Carlson also, and even Governor Ventura going out the door, remember in his last session when you could see a deficit on the planning horizon, suggested the big plan. So it's something that previous governors back to when I was in school have always, when the state has had a financial crisis, been willing to consider some revenue. I would argue this isn't even a tax increase. It's actually a cut. I'm proposing to cut the general sales tax rate.
But the governor said, this governor said yesterday, in reference actually to your Viking Stadium plan, that flat out, we don't do tax increases. What would make you think this would be any different?
Well, I think we have to, I just think the state has to have the discussion about, you know, the governor can't have it both ways. He can't say that it's a payment delay to schools, and then, you know, the truth is, it's a cut. There is no provision in law that is going to pay back the schools their $1.2 billion aid shift. It's not going to happen. The only way schools are going to be paid that money back is if the legislature appropriates the money. It's a cut. So it would be helpful, I think, if everybody would just be honest about the fact that it's not a payment delay, it's not a shift, there's no provision in law that schools are going to be paid this money back. This bill will not only put the provision in law that they're going to be paid back at $120 million a year, it would provide the money to do it.